we do have a large agenda in front of us. It is 3:30, and we're ready to start the May 19th meeting of the Solid Waste Management Authority. So, again, I call this meeting to order. The first point of order will be to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be led by Angela Glory.
Ready? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And well done, Angela. Okay. I told you she had to sing the Star Spangled Banner. So I'm a little disappointed. The next matter is our public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please give your name and city or county residency, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. So, do we have any public comments this afternoon? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I gave some handouts to the clerk there, which hope you each will get. Basically what happened last Saturday is I usually do, I went out in no big addition to do some hiking, and I barely got past the entrance gate. And all John, John Curtis is his name. I live in that county,
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr.
Anyway, I seen this big mess of trash off to the left, which I was appalled. And I noticed a lot of this loose, so I pulled out some bags and picked up what I could, you know, so and left the rest and then notified the park so they can take care of it. But amongst those others, as you can see, a couple mattresses and box springs. And I think there's one thing that you are considering, which is establishing a recycling and take-back program for those. And I would encourage you to do that. And beyond that, I'm totally behind. You gotta take a bite out of the way, and let's figure out ways to people stop trashing our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, any other public comment? General public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our open session agenda items. On the consent agenda, we have the approval of the minutes of the regular session of Tuesday, April 21, acknowledgement filing May 4, 2015 letter from the 15th Annual Youth and Family Fair, approval of a budget transfer in the amount of $12,120. And that is our consent agenda. Are there any changes? Or
Mr. Chairman, yes, just for clarification, Ted, it would be helpful if you explain what that transfer is all about to the public.
Sure.
Essentially, the biggest change here is in the office insurance. And this is insurance that's required as part of the iBank loan documents, and it will increase approximately $2,000 of our annual expense. But this is far beyond that, because we found that it was less expensive to pay this all at once rather than to pay it in installments over the coming year.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda that I just outlined? Okay, seeing no public comments, move to approve. Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as a whole. Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be approved. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Galore?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Gittman?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chairman Holly?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, under acknowledgements, unfortunately, Mary Wilson couldn't be with us today, but we wanted to acknowledge her service with the Solid Waste Management Authority. We want to get her this acknowledgement as soon as possible. Well, you know, certainly Mary can come back and we'll go ahead and say some nice things in person if she can make it to the next meeting. But this is resolution number 215-04, and I'd like to read that now. Honoring Mary Wilson for her service as Authority Commissioner 2013 to 2015. Whereas Mary Wilson served as a Commissioner of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority between March 2013 and April 2015. Whereas Mary Wilson's appointment to the Authority Board of Commissioners followed her appointment in February 2012 and her continuing services to the Delaware Solid Waste Task Force, providing yet another excellent example of the benefits of reuse and recycling. And whereas Mary Wilson served over 2 years as an Authority Commissioner, and whereas Mary Wilson served during a period of many significant Authority activities, including substantial expansion of the Authority's paint recycling program in partnership with Hambro WSG and Paint Care, and adoption of the Authority's mission statement in September 2014. And whereas Mary Wilson applied her experience as a business owner in ways she felt would improve the Authority. Now therefore be it resolved that the Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority Board hereby expresses appreciation for the diligence and dedication that Mary Wilson exhibited during her service as an Authority Commissioner. Passed and adopted by the Board of Commissioners of the Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority Board, County of Delaware, State of California, this 19th day of May 2015. So again, thank you, Mary. And just for the record, I guess we could have public comments in this. Mr. Boston.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Bill Lonsdale. I live in Crescent City. I'd like to take the occasion to say that in the time that I've watched public affairs going on here in Delaware County, rarely have I seen somebody who did her homework as well and as thoroughly and as frequently as Mrs. Wilson. And even though she and I politely agreed to disagree on many things having to do with the future and direction of the Authority, she has set a standard of dedication that I think will be very, very difficult to meet. And I'd like to personally pay her some compliments about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Any comments, other comments from the Commission? Okay, very good. And I'd like to thank Mary as well. She put in a lot of hours, and anyone that throws themselves into the breach and does this kind of work, I think should be congratulated and thank her again. Okay, so,
Chair Holland,
yes.
this is in the form of a resolution, so it'll have to be formally adopted.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2015-04, resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority honoring Mary Wilson for her service as Authority Commissioner 2013-2014.
Okay, so moved and seconded to adopt resolution number 2015-04. I think we can probably do it by voice. All in favor?
Resolution required.
Okay, then please poll the vote.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaston?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
And Chairman Holland.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that reminder. Okay, the next matter before us is the landfill post-closure. This is number 3.1, status report regarding the authority's ongoing appeal of waste discharge requirements fee from the State Water Resources Control Board. Mr. Ward.
I had intended to include in this agenda a letter describing the status of our ongoing appeal with the waste discharge requirements fees. The first slide on the PowerPoint, which if it's brought up, will show that of the bill that is $70,781, we have currently paid $30,625, leaving an outstanding balance of $40,156. It's necessary that we explain the status of our underpayment and our intent to appeal, to follow up on a meeting that we had with the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff that I reported on last month. And I believe that they will support our appeal to the State Water Resources Board that regional boards should be allowed flexibility to acknowledge challenges associated with low population and small facility size, which are currently not in the threat of complexity rating definitions. But that letter is not currently included in this agenda because I was not able to get to it. So the status, but I did want to make sure the board was very aware that this is a notice of violation and we are at risk of potentially being fined up to $1,000 a day.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Ward?
I would make sure that you CC that letter to McGuire and Wood. And I think even to the chairman of the California Water Board, because I think they need to understand the plight of rural communities and that the formula is, it must take in the size and nature of the communities when it tries to do a fine, especially in communities that are working to find a resolution to problems rather than, as I travel up and down the state, I've seen communities that have just turned a blind eye to their landfills. So we are ahead of the game with some communities, but I think that we should be CCing them. And in fact, I think that we should probably make sure we do another briefing with Senator McGuire and Senator with their chief of staffs to let them know what's up. And I don't know if you want to do that or if we want someone from the board to do that. But I really believe they need to have the story in the front row.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think it's important that we take notice of these notices of violation and know that there's a certain risk in proceeding as we're proceeding, but it seems like we as a board have thought that's the right thing to do, so unless there's, okay, very good. So there's no action necessary there, but thank you.
I have standing direction and hope to bring you something next month.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to probably see McGuire this month. Can I carry forth our position?
I have no objection. Anyone from the board? Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, the next matter before us is the collections franchise items. Number 4.1 is discussion of possible action regarding collections change order 6, enacting rate adjustments based on changes in the consumer price index.
Could I have the next slide, please?
Are we supposed to be doing that?
No, I think so. Got it. Is it visible to the board members? Do you see something?
Yes.
Okay, good.
The public should know.
The public should also, if there's a way to do that. She's working on it. So hopefully it will happen in the not too distant future. So rates will be going down for all solid waste services starting in July 1st if these change orders and rate resolutions are approved. Now, it seems almost like a law of gravity. Just like things generally fall down, it seems like rates generally go up. Next year, rates will be the same or go down slightly for all solid waste services countywide. It's almost as remarkable as levitation. Everyone will get a little bit of savings. These savings are modest. They're based on the annual rate adjustments based on the Consumer Price Index. That's what the CPIU stands for, Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. Collections change order 6 reduces Recology Del Norte collection rates, which are the maximum rates Recology can charge. As a private contractor, Recology has this option to occasionally charge less than the full rates, but the authority says the maximum rates they're allowed to charge under the franchise. The transfer station operations change order reduces the transfer station service fees that the authority pays Hambro WSG for providing the services of the transfer station. And the rate resolution reduces the rate at all of the transfer stations in according with these other change orders. Next slide, please. So if we look at collections change order 6 and what it does, you can see that for most rates, it'll take it down a couple pennies or a little bit more for the larger containers. But mostly it's a very modest rate change. Next slide, please. But considering that Recology Del Norte comprises most of the solid waste revenues in Del Norte County, this translates to nearly $2,500 in savings overall in the coming fiscal year. So with that, staff recommendation is that the board approve and authorize signatures on collection change order number 6.
Great, thank you. Any technical questions of Mr. Moore? Okay, seeing none, any public comment on the reduction of these rates in accordance with change order 6? Okay, seeing no public comments, we'll bring it back to the dais here.
I move that the board approve and authorize signatures on the collections change order number 6.
Thank you. We have a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to change Collections change order number 6. And just a little bit more discussion. I think this is a very good thing. And what I've enjoyed, or what I've been comfortable with all along, is we have a formula-driven system. So it goes up and it goes down. And even though this is a very modest decrease, it just shows the objectivity of that system. So thank you for maintaining that.
And absolutely, credit goes to the wisdom and decisions of the authority board who's responsible for the development of the agreement, and to staff, including yours truly, who spent months crafting these agreements for the public benefit. I am the one who does all of the calculations, and I've reviewed these calculations with both Ambrose and Recology.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, very good. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Getman?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
And Chairman Holland?
Yes, thank you. So on to 4.2 of our agenda, status report regarding Recology's efforts to appoint or hire a general manager for Recology Del Norte. Mr. Ward.
Yes, I'm delighted to see that Ed Farewell is here from Recology Del Norte, and he can give us an update as to the status of that recruitment.
Good afternoon, Ed Farewell, Acting General Manager of Recology Del Norte. I'm happy to say that Jeremy Herber has been providing excellent leadership, and as a result, we are promoting Jeremy as the operations manager, and we will be replacing Jeremy with a new supervisor who we have identified, made an offer and have acceptance, but we're still going through currently the background and the physical, so I cannot at this point tell you who that is until we're complete with the process. But nonetheless, Jeremy has brought a great skill set in his 6 months that he's been with Recology, and the addition of the new hire is going to bring additional experience and much needed know-how in our both our maintenance and our routing department, so we can continue to provide excellent service. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue as the acting GM of Recology Del Norte.
Okay, thank you. That's all very good news.
Yeah, it is.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Ed, I just want to say good job, and everyone likes to have nice things said about them. I've already had a few interactions with Jeremy. He's professional, he's prompt, he's dependable, and he's giving me accurate information on issues that are ecology oriented, and I just want to say good luck, and you can expect our full cooperation, Jeremy. Good job. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, the item 4.3, discussion of possible request for Recology Del Norte to present at a future authority meeting options to address issues of concern related to Recology carts, including lid closures and cart stability and high winds. I hope you were aware this was on here.
I'd be happy to speak. That'd be great. This came up during the agenda setting meeting when both the chair and the vice chair specifically suggested that our contractors be engaged in reporting to the investigations they've done to improve our system, or they be asked to look into issues of community concern. And so there were two issues that were raised. And with respect to Recology, although I have to say in the director's report, there's a number of issues Recology is working on. I very much appreciate those efforts. But in addition to those, the board was specifically asking that Recology look into or provide a future report on options related to improving the lid closures or cart stability in high winds. This is an area where we have heard concerns from a number of customers, depending upon their location and circumstance. But obviously, when the bin tips over or the lid is blown open and then it tips over, and there's trash all over the street, nobody's happy about that. No one wants that issue to continue, and we all want to find a solution. So we're essentially requesting that Recology engage in that discussion in ways that we might be able to improve that aspect of service.
Okay, thank you.
I was the person who thought we should put this on the agenda, but after further consideration, I was thinking that possibly one of the classes at the high school, especially the class that designs that uses the 3D printer, that they may be able to wrap their heads around it and find a solution with these cans. It might be a great exercise for a project, and we can start engaging the community into that dialogue. That was my first step in this, is that I think that we want to see a resurrection of the community and dialogue, and hear from Recology on things that, we've set up this route and it is impossible, so we can fix stuff instead of just wait for a 20-year contract. So I'm hoping that this is the first phase of dialogue for this new board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Yes.
Elizabeth Henry. I live in the county and on Pebble Beach, and I'm one of those that has had their garbage can and their recycling can go in all directions. Right now, the solution is big rocks. So the recycling truck came by, and that's what she suggested. It works pretty well, but we would love a solution that that would work without having to drag the rocks out. So anyway, thank you very much for taking this on, and I thank Ecology for being willing to do something about it.
Thank you. I could share mine first. Any other public comment here? Yes, sir.
I've dealt with this in other areas, and I thought I could give a suggestion. Maybe it'll help in the meantime till we have time to get together again. But the toters that are being used are designed. The good thing is you have maybe the best toters that are out there at this moment. They're an EBR2 with a large base, heavy-duty toter, which have a molded rim. So if the lids are closed properly, they're supposed to withstand 40-mile-an-hour winds. We know that doesn't always happen. If the toters get tipped up a little bit, and the wind gets up and flips them over, then they fall over. So maybe we could work on education. But the other thing I was going to suggest is that depending on the wind, you can point the hinges into the wind, and we would instruct our drivers, to handle that if necessary. When it's a windy day, I know you put it out the night before. Sometimes it's not windy, and then you wake up and it's windy. But when you do know it's windy, that's something that we found that has been helpful. I just want to throw that out as a suggestion.
Before you leave, we tried something at one time. It was just taking a phone book and duct taping it to the bottom.
Yes.
The bottom of the lid, and just weighted it enough that it just helped it stay shut.
Right.
And that may not be recommended. Cards all over the county, but as you look at a design, maybe there's some way to weight that lid.
In the manufacturer, we have talked to them about changing the design of the lid. It's quite costly for them to I think, just to retool. This was a couple of years ago. It was $1.5 million for them to retool to change the lid. But they did have some weighted devices, and the problem was that they were coming off as the cards were jolting and becoming a safety issue. That was the issue with the weight.
That's why we need those kids at the high school, because they'll figure out an aftermarket weight that will hold those puppies down.
Yeah, okay. That's, yeah.
More
Yeah,
Am I getting you correctly? You're saying normally the lid faces outward toward the street. Are you saying on windy days, turn it around?
yeah, turn it in any direction that the hinges are facing into the wind. That way the lid's always blown down, and then we'll just deal
And
with
it
it.
doesn't cause a problem for your drivers?
Well, over time, if you put it out like that all the time, what we found is when they get dumped, they're not made to be dumped sideways or backwards, that it puts leverage on the lid, and we do have a problem with lids breaking over a period of time if you did that week in and week out. But on windy days, you do that, we'll just deal with it. That's just a quick suggestion. Might be helpful.
Thank you. So anything else on this item? Thank you for bringing that up. So we'll move on then to transfer station item. 5.1, discussion and possible action regarding transfer station operations change order 20, enacting fee adjustments based on changes to the consumer price index. Mr. Ward.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, as I explained, this goes with the rate adjustments and is similarly calculated. So, the main transfer station per ton rate will be moving from 142.24 per ton to 142.15 per ton. And other rates are going down accordingly. Next slide, please. And considering Hambro's gross revenue last year, we expect that overall system-wide, there's a little over $1,000 savings from approving this change order. Staff recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Ward? Okay. Any public? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any public comment? Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve change order 20. Any other discussion? Okay, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner DeWar?
Yes.
Commissioner Getman?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chairman Holly?
Yes. Thank you. We'll move on then to 5.2, discussion and possible request for Hambro/WSG to present at a future authority meeting options to enable recovery of clothing, textiles, shoes, and belts in Delmar County. So, Mr. Ward.
This is similar to the refology item. It was a way to engage Hambro with the discussion of their, essentially reporting on their ongoing efforts, because I know that they have looked into this. And I think the board would be, it would help educate us all to learn from that experience and to have them report at it at a future meeting, either the next meeting or the one after. So just to reiterate what this is we're talking about, a lot of communities will have very easily, readily available recycling of clothing, textiles, boots, shoes, belts, that kind of thing. We don't have that here. And so it's worth having a better understanding as to why that is. And so we're simply asking Hambro to come to a future meeting and explain what they've done to date and what they think we might be able to do in future, if anything.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I do have one. I know that Smith River School depends on their shoe recycling program for funding. They have somebody who comes in and picks up shoes and either resells them or recycles them. And I'm wondering how that would affect it, because I think that's, you know, a pretty core of their school fundraising.
Okay. Interesting. Anything else from the commission here?
I just wanted to let Hambros know that this discussion came at the setting of the agenda as a possibility to increase communication on what we could assist Hambros with once it's inside the gate, how we can keep it out of the big truck that goes to the landfill and hopefully save dollars, or, you know, make it less expensive to haul stuff out of the county. So it was a discussion around how can we strengthen that partnership and get stuff out of the waste stream that will make our landfill, when we take it over the hill, to make that transport cheaper. So that's the ultimate goal that I have in this.
You know, it occurred to me when I was involved with the Delaware Association for Developmental Services, and we actually had a recycling program, the disabled folks that we had working over there to work with. And we actually used to bail clothing. It just came to me that we used to bail clothing. I think we shipped it to Portland. So, so that would be interesting. Is there any public comment on this idea? Okay. Seeing none then, there's no action necessary here. We'll look forward to hearing from Hambro at a later date. Thank you. So going on to other solid waste authority matters. Number 6.1. Discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of the authority's budget for fiscal year 2015-2016 and scheduling a hearing on June 16th for final adoption. Mr. Ward.
I have presented this, let's see if we can go to, sorry about that. Since presenting the draft authority budget to both the city and the county board of supervisors, this afternoon I received an email from Jay Serena detailing some comments from the Board of Supervisors. I believe that we can address all of these comments in a revised budget, but I see that Supervisor Henningsen is here, and he might have a few words.
Thanks, Gary Henningsen, Livingston County. Yeah, I just went over the budget again. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. If you pass the budget the way that it's presented now, you'll be $30,000 plus out of balance, according to the figures that I got from Clint Chad, the auditor. I really don't have anything else to say.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
In the staff report, did you have a question?
Yeah, or, all right, so we have to make these changes. Oh, is there, am I ask a question?
Yeah, yes. Okay, go ahead.
So we have to make these changes. Now, what's our time frame in which to make these changes to adjust it so we'll have enough money for the fiscal year? Right. We're in the middle of May right now, where this has to be in and done. We need a special meeting to do this?
I don't think so. We should be able to adopt it at our regular June meeting on June 16th, and that will give us enough time to draft a revision and to present it again to the Board of Supervisors for their review, so that we can come into the June 16th meeting with the final budget ready for adoption.
So that the public is aware of what these three changes are, I just want to let the public know we're on being taken out. Salaries, benefits, liability insurance, and cost plan, it appears the numbers in the proposed budget, the one we have with us today, are not consistent with the numbers given before, and our auditor controller, Mr. Shad, has assessed that we would be out of balance. And I think that is what Supervisor Henderson was bringing
May I
to
respond to that?
Well, it's three, the three, and then I'll we'll give it to you afterward. And it appears, number two, it appears that we have, the UTED have accounted for an executive director position and increased salaries and benefits accordingly, but you also have increased the part-time and temporary salary structure. And the last one is regarding the legend with the parentheses, which indicates a negative number, is reversed for indicating increase and instead of decrease. So that was the three changes that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Mr. Ward, you want to respond?
Yes, so I want to make sure that the board understands that this is the first budget that gets drafted by the city or the county. And so when we start that drafting process, I get preliminary numbers from the county auditor, and those were the numbers that went into the budget that I had presented to the board. On March 14th, after the board agenda had already been published, I got these additional changes. So there was no way to address these changes in the initial budget simply because there wasn't information that was available at that time. Regarding the inclusion of the full staffing as well as part-time temporary positions, the part-time temporary expenses were projected from the last 2 years where our part-time temporary expenses have gone up. And it does include all of the full staffing from the salaries and benefits numbers that were provided by the county auditor based on the staffing chart. So that's the reason for having both of those included. I would welcome board input, but my inclination at this point is to include a slightly elevated part-time temporary, but perhaps not quite as much as it is in this current draft budget. So it might be reduced a little bit, but it will probably be slightly elevated just because in all likelihood, at the start of the fiscal year, we will continue to need more part-time temporary staff.
Thank you.
Regarding the formatting issues, of course, I'll go over the final format with the auditor's office, so we should be able to resolve any other outstanding issues.
So are there questions? Mr. Ward, I was thinking about number 2, and I don't think it's unreasonable probably to increase the part-time temporary salaries, given that the number of illnesses and absences we've had. And it may just be a bad time for staff at Solid Waste Management Authority, but I can see a situation in which those would go up, even though you're fully funding an executive director. But if we could do it and reduce that by part of the budget, I'd be in favor of it. But just understand that would be a reasonable function if it's based on last year's numbers.
Thank you for that feedback. And also, it's important to realize that I will, in the revision of the budget, will have to come up with some $32,615 $15 in reductions on other expense lines, so I'll be looking at every last penny.
What was your total?
$32,615 are just the increases that are indicated in the staff report on page 2. And those were all coming from the county auditor's office.
Well, you have a good start with the CPI going down. That's a few bucks.
That's true. About 10%. Oh, that's right. That's right.
That's an additional fine because it went down.
So any input or direction for the board relative to the budget? I don't think any actions necessary tonight, but except maybe some direction to make the changes that are necessary to balance it.
And recognize that the budget that I will be presenting to the Board of Supervisors based on their request will be different than the budget you're looking at in front of you now. But that's because I'm following through on their comments.
You know, I wonder if it's not also necessary, I hate to create more work, but to bring us back to the city. If it's a different bunch of numbers than what they've seen.
If that's what you would like me to do, I can certainly do that.
Let's ask the mayor.
Yeah, I think we should bring back to the city. If we approve a different budget than the Board of Supervisors, then it's really not joint powers authority. Confused powers authority.
Jointly confused. Okay, well, is that, I don't even know that you need to be present for that. We can explain these changes when they occur, but I think we just need to have it hold Mr. Plotz.
And we have a regular meeting on June 1st.
Excellent. I'll plan accordingly.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I understand why we're looking at a budget right now that's not balanced, recognizing the need for the items that we have now a stronger, more concrete level of what they're actually going to be as opposed to projected. I also, after talking with the chief county administrating officer upstairs, I was like, well, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? And part of it is that there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, between our proposed budget and our final budget and the working documents that the county uses, because the county uses in their budget projections, they do a year-to-date column, they do a percentage balance for year-to-date, and then they do the proposed. And where we don't have that in this document, and it probably wouldn't be in the final document, but it probably should have been in the working document as it was circulated to this board, the city, and the county, and I think that could have clarified some of the issues. I also want to and I went back and I looked at some, and I didn't have enough time in the day to make sure of the old budgets and this budget, but this budget is pretty close to the final budget that's in the county's budget book, with the exception of the increase and decrease is not shown in the final budgets in the county. But I think that where the angst came is that this was a working document, where people were seeing it as a final document because it was replicating final form. And so I would suggest, and I know that your time is always crunched, but before we go through our next budget cycle, that we work with the county auditor and see that the spreadsheets of the development of the budget are similar, where you have the last year's actuals and the adopted and the revised, and then the year-to-date expenses, and then the current balance, and then the percentage of how that budget has spent out. I think that helps when we come back to try to figuring out the future budget for the next year. And I think that would take care of some of the issues that we had. And then the only other one that I can report is that for every section, you did a subtotal, a running subtotal, with the exception of the interfund. And it's hard to tell if that was where your page ran out of printing, and that's the reason it was missing. But that we should make sure that every section has the running subtotal, because it's easier for review.
Did it get cut off?
I think it was cut off. Is what
It might be cut off. It's on the bottom of the second page of numbers. It says inter-fund transfers. Is there no total there?
Well, there were subtotals it was just, the request was that there be subtotals for each category. So it's easier to look at running totals, and I don't know if the auditor has anything else that if he thinks that will tighten up get everything tight and working in the same direction. Because my goal is not to have an argument over the format of the budget, but rather have a robust discussion on how we need to spend our money. So thank you.
Anything else from the commission? Okay, is there any public comment on the budget and how we're moving forward, any of the content of that budget? Okay, seeing none then, it says possible action, but it doesn't sound like there's any.
We do need to schedule a public
I
hearing.
have one, before you go forward, I just wanted to ask the auditor if that works.
Lynn Shed, Auditor Controller, County of Delaware. Referring to the format? Yeah, what I took from the last board meeting was they were just looking for, and I two of you were here, just the subtotals so you could see, and Ted emailed the version to me and asked how that looked. I said it looked okay to me because you had the subtotals and you could follow it. You know, and then on Ted's behalf, the numbers we talked about with the workers' comp and the benefits, and that's going to be increased from right now. He didn't have those; they weren't available when this first came out. And then after, I didn't know you had your budget going forward until last Monday. I called about the budget being on the board agenda. And so on Thursday, I was able to give him the most current numbers. Well, this first all started, but he didn't have this available to him. So he used last year's figures, which is acceptable to do, and then gets new figures in.
So I guess I'm asking, are we on the right track?
I think so.
Okay.
Unless there's something else you want to see.
And some of those numbers change mid-year, don't they? Some of the numbers.
Our numbers don't change mid-year.
I thought there were some that changed.
We don't change ours mid-year, ours they stay the same. The big difference you're going to see in this year's budget, big change will be in the employee benefits, which is our health insurance is going up quite a bit, about 20% per employee. So our workers' comp is a small change, which just happens with claims, and then the liability insurance again. And the cost fund has changed based on prior year, 2-year history. But the big change you're going to see is the health insurance is going to go quite a bit. Thank you.
And I guess I still have one more that you can, not for you, Sharon, sorry, that you will, even if we had, if there were a draft report tomorrow, there's going to be a lag in personnel costs at whichever direction we go. So that will help to be a formula for you to identify where we can do some savings in that $32,615 deficit. Thanks.
Okay, I think we discussed
So
this.
the one action that we do need to have is we need to schedule a public hearing for public comment on the authority budget for fiscal year 15-16 to be for the 16th.
You're suggesting that's our next regularly scheduled meeting?
That's correct.
Any opposition to that? Well, maybe we should. I don't know if that.
I think consensus direction works for that.
Okay, consensus that we'll do it at the next meeting. Okay, very good. Thank you. Good work. So moving on, I believe that we are at matter 6.2, discussion and possible action regarding adoption of resolution 2015-03. The resolution of the governing board of the Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority adjusting rates for the Delaware County Transfer Station, the Klamath and Gatsby Transfer Stations, and the franchise collection.
Next slide, please. So overall, this rate resolution adjusts the transfer station rates based on the changes to the service fees and adjusts the rates for Klamath and Gatsby transfer stations, resulting in, at those facilities, a reduction of a savings of $534 system-wide. So overall, all of the change orders of the rate resolution together save a little over $4,000 system-wide. And this is despite the fact that the Solid Waste Authority's facilities have had the lowest rates in the region for several years running, and yet we're still reducing them. So staff recommend approval.
Okay, again, questions for Mr. Ward? Seeing none, any public comment on this matter? This is resolution 2015-03. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. What's your pleasure? I entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2015-03, the resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Del Mar Solid Waste Management Authority adjusting refuse disposal rates for Del Mar County Transfer Station and franchise collection rates.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve a rate resolution 2015-03. Is there any other additional discussion?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
What is the overall savings again?
$4,078.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, please poll the vote.
Commissioner DeWart?
Yes.
Mr. Cassino?
Yes.
Mr. Catlin?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chairman Holly?
Yes. Okay, thank you. 6.3, discussion and possible action regarding means to address blight and illegal dumping and abatement and lien associated with 43 Weber Drive, Plano, California, APN 127-220-40.
I've asked Mr. Mason to come and make a presentation on this abatement as it did start as a county project.
So, just for those of you that aren't aware, it started off as a illegal camping complaint, an RV parked on the street, leaking sewage on the street, and it evolved into, oh, it's a drug house, oh, it's a hoarder, oh, it's a giant pile of trash. And so it's been a moving target the whole way along. And because it started off as illegal camping, using the county ordinances, got in front of the hearing officer, he said, have you been inside the house yet? No, because we're going to do all of it all at once, go back, inspect the inside of the house, go back. Long story short, he found it was a nuisance, ordered it vacated, boarded up, cleaned up, taken care of. So went out and got bids came in kind of high, exceeded our available budget, and we're looking at other ways to abate the problem. So I'm using every tool in the toolbox that I have, posted the property, thrown in the money to clean it up, did file charges with the district attorney for maintaining a public nuisance under the penal code. That goes to arraignment on Friday of this week, but that won't get it cleaned up. That'll just take a stop. While we were doing that, I got a report from the neighbor that the property owner is sometimes sleeping in the house with the garbage, sometimes not, and he's charging money to have people bring trash to the property. So he's essentially opened his own landfill and plans to burn it.
Competition with the Del Mar Solid Waste Management Authority.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, he's back into the driveway at the moment, so, and we added that to the case with the DA. Hopefully, we can get him to stop, but again, that doesn't get it cleaned up. So, in talking with Mr. Ward, again, this is a moving target, which is why you don't have a written report, because things change from day to day. But it looks like a possibility is to issue a notice for violation of the authorities ordinance, and then bring it back to this board for confirmation that it's another nuisance in order to abate under the authorities ordinance, but then the authority would fund the abatement, and then the authority would collect on the lien with the property sold. And I believe it's due for lien sale, tax lien sale in May of next year. So it would be a pretty quick turnaround on the funding, provided it's sold. And here's the thing, to get you numbers, the lowest bid I got to pick up the trash and put it in a bin, out in front bins, was $3,300. That does not include the price of bins. An old-time contractor here in Denver, probably the best way to figure trash is give you your best estimate how much you think it is, multiply by 3, and you're going to be pretty close. So it looks like 1.5 to 2 bins. So high side 6 bins, low side 4.
Mr. Mason, are you talking about the big 40 cubic?
Yeah, the 40 cubic yard bins, and that would be loaded with backhoes and be packed in as tight as they can be, not overweight. Not overweight, just full, not over full, but full. The problem with loading by hand is that with a 40-yard bin, you can never really get them full, which is why when I load by hand, I prefer the 20s and 30s, because you're easy to get full. But when you're using equipment, you can actually get a 40-yard bin full. So that's why I use the 40-yard bin. You can estimate how much you have. So it's mostly clothes, household trash, and furniture, some scrap metal, there's a boat, that kind of stuff. So,
6.4,
And the bid also included boarding up the doors windows to keep people from running down the property.
So, Mr. Mason, are we asking for two things? Are you asking for a donation of our Tony allotted?
No, I'm not asking for donations. What I'm asking for is direction from the Board of Commissioners if you want to proceed using the authority's ordinance. It's essentially a do-over, but it'd be a fast track because they have 5 days to start, 15 days to finish under the ordinance. The odds are they're not going to start within 5. I can schedule it for a hearing before the board at the next meeting. I only have to give 15 days notice. If I do that, it'll be back before the board, and then you can decide, is it a nuisance? What's it going to cost? What we're going to do? But I don't want to start that process unless I have the support of the board to do so.
Other questions?
So by bringing it to the board, it doesn't significantly delay the cleanup? I mean, would the cleanup happen much quicker under the county ordinance?
The cleanup is beyond the county resources. So we could either get it cleaned, there's a rat problem because of the garbage. I wanted to get it done as soon as possible because there's a problem. If I roll it into July, it's going to take a big bite out of my budget for the rest of the year for the county. And pretty much cripple the counties to make that effort for all of next year. So if I can get it in this budget year, if it will fit in your budget this year, then that's beneficial to the community and preserves the resources that I have at the county level for the rest of all next fiscal year. So that's the issue. I'm just here to see what the pleasure of the board is. Very good.
So, is there a lien on this property?
There's back taxes on it right now.
And that's it?
That's it.
And so if no one bids on the back taxes, and we have a lien, so nobody steps up that wants this APN number, does our lien become,
It's equal to the property taxes.
and our lien will exceed the property taxes, correct?
It will be added to the property taxes. So the problem is they haven't paid
Correct.
taxes. And so the tax rate down there is not that high.
Right.
And so it's not that much money. The property is worth much more that's owed on it, but it's not due for tax sale until May of next year.
So it'd be 2016 that we would have to hold out for a lien for replacement.
But odds are it would sell, just because the value of the land, you get sewer and water and chain swap out of mobile home and there.
Of course, we always run that risk that someone will pay 1 year tax and
Well, there would be a special assessment, so the most you'd be out would be, I believe it's 3 years from special assessment. That goes to sale. And that's 18% interest until it is paid, so.
on those 3 years with our lien.
Mr. Preston?
I was just thinking, I can ask what a bin pull costs for our worries, that 40 yarder is like $1,300 and you need 6 of them, 7,800, and then the 33 on top of it is almost $12,000.
Yeah, and my entire budget for the year is $14,500 for an account. So you can see between a rock and a hard place. It's like I have an order to clean it, I don't have any way to do it.
And this is on your plan? It's within the
This is-
reservation?
No, this is not. This is in Hunter Creek subdivision.
Oh, so it's past 2 miles from the river.
It's outside the reservation.
From what you said, there's more of a lien than just the property taxes, right? We have a bank or someone's holding a note.
Nope.
They said he owed,
They owe back taxes.
oh, I thought it sounded to me like he owed some house payments that he hadn't been paying.
There's no house payment fee, it goes back taxes.
Is it within a coastal zone by chance?
Hunter Creek,
I mean, I'm just trying to reach to try to figure out where we can get funding.
I don't believe it is. It's too far up the creek to be in the coastal zone. I have to check, but I don't think it is.
Oh, it's not the national forest.
On the national forest.
So Dave, this, it's not due for a tax sale until 20,
May next year, May of 26.
so the period that the authority would have to wait to be reimbursed would be over about a year. Is that what you're saying? So you're asking for the funding of this money so we can get this matter. I think it sounds like a good bet. And first of all, we have to get it.
Yeah, and so on this one, the county would bill the authority for my time from the time that I issued the authority's notice, not all the time I have it on the other stuff. So it would be, my time would be that much for
the bill.
And how much is left in your cleanup budget?
I have about $3,000 left.
And I'm trying to figure out if we could split it a little bit, because my guess is we don't have a big reserve, am I correct?
Our cash balance appears okay, but one of the things that we need to do, as this discussion about regarding the budget went through the auditor's office, is it became really clear that in order for us to all agree exactly what our cash balance is, the best time to do that is after the close of the fiscal year. So that will be September or October. And other than that, it's like the balance on your credit card, on your check account balance. It'll fluctuate depending on which checks are written and what's coming.
Well, I know the board of supervisors there were members of the board that were appalled that we had floor repair before we had the final year-end report, and now we're getting ready to spend 13 grand and know we're 34,000 short already in the proposed budget.
Which is why I wanted to bring it to the board to get your blessing before I started that process. If the board doesn't want to, that's okay, you know, but I need to know.
I don't know kind of how nice this property would be if it were fixed up. I mean, maybe a private receiver could come in, and that's how the city's been operating very successfully over the past several years. Is that we can find receivers that are willing to make the investment as long as they get to kind of the property, or at least dispose of the property to get their money back. But I don't know the condition of the property. You have to talk to a receiver to see if we can want to do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm a little confused, Dave, so walk me through this.
Sure.
We have 20 donated ecology dumpsters per year, is that correct, Jeremy? Okay. Now, I don't know what our inventory is and what we have available to us, but theoretically, we could donate those four and waive the contents of the fees in there, and the only thing would be the labor, as you said, $3,300 to pay for this. So this is $12,000.
That's not
Very correct. The bid polls are under contract with Recology, so they're not donated, they're part of the contract. They are at the board's discretion, but they are only the bid polls. So the actual disposal of the materials inside would still be an additional cost.
And that's a board action if we elect to. We've done that before.
Yes.
But in a discussion we've had before, if you don't use those 20, you lose it, or you use it or lose it. And we've been to that point where we're in November and December, and we have not used 20 per year. So this is what we call this budgeting of these donated bins. So I think we need to sit down and clearly identify, with July 4th coming and the sea cruise coming and the operation on Front Street, just where we stand with these, with the inventory of these bins for the balance of the calendar year. It's essentially 6 months ago. We're in June, so 7 months. And where do we stand on that? Or if you could get us a report so we know how many we're dealing with to help exacerbate this problem.
I would encourage to take a mid-year look at that. But I think along with that, we adopted a policy and a hierarchy of how to use those bins. And generally that doesn't have to do with private residences. I think the first priority was to go to public lands and things like that. So we'll have to review that too as we go forward, I think.
Allow me to present an option, because I can issue the notice tomorrow, which will start the clock, and then come back before the board. And you can either say, yes, proceed, or no, don't go any further with it, because you would have that option. The board can always just dismiss the case, if you want, or not. Just saying.
And if the county issues it, then we can't come in behind them and issue it?
We discussed that at length, and the MOU that we have doesn't really mesh. We take a separate agreement for an amendment to the MOU from the Board of Supervisors to ratify, and of course the city will, because it's joint powers, they have to ratify the change to the MOU, which is why we said, the existing MOU lays out this procedure. So if we just use that, that's the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get it through the process. And we talked about possibly adjusting the MOU in the future after all the workloads drop a little bit, because Ted Craig will doing all the budget, he's swamped. But that's something we want to look at between us as adjusting to allow that sort of thing, where we could partner budgets on one project, because I've gotten Cal Recycle liens in the past, where they were a named beneficiary on the lien. And when it was paid, they got their share, and we got our share. But in return, we doesn't allow for that.
Mr. Mason, you brought this to us as an exigent matter. You think this is important?
Like I said, I've used every tool in the toolbox that I have.
I interpret that as saying we need to act. We have a health problem. We have a burn.
And there is a massive rat problem. I called from the neighbors, and I'm trying to get proof that the guys bringing the trash to the property, some had some criminal charges, they could stop, but that doesn't get it cleaned up. If he had money, I'd be confident the probation department could get him to clean it up on his own in terms of probation, but they're not going to give him money for his dump fees, and he doesn't have any money to pay them.
Is it a riparian area or any kind of
It's
wetland?
right on Hunter Creek. The property extends into the creek bed. So
And Cal Recycle is not interested in,
the grants that I have are for farm and ranch and can't benefit the person that caused the mess. So it doesn't qualify for the grant funding that I currently have. If I had the other grant, which is the illegal dumping cleanup, it would. That's not the grant I'm working under right now.
what does that one do?
I have to wait another year before I can apply for that again. So every 3 years you can apply.
I hate to go back to the city, but I need to in this. What we did was we took, and it's hard to find the money, but we found $100,000. And so we're funding these receiverships, and as the properties turn over, it goes back into the fund. It just continues to rotate, and there's nothing to preclude the county from doing that, is there?
No, there's an ordinance that allows the board to create a revolving fund. That has never happened. And I've requested, and that hasn't happened. I've requested receiverships, and that hasn't happened. So I can't speak for the board, obviously, but I'm doing everything that I possibly can.
So reiterate what happens if we go ahead and then we,
So I issued the notice of nuisance in order to abate. If they don't start within 5 days, I schedule for a hearing. I got to give them at least 15 days notice before the hearing. It comes before the board, you review the evidence, and you can either continue the case to the next hearing, you can decide that there's no nuisance and dismiss it, or you can order the property owner to clean it up himself and give him so many days, in which case if he doesn't, then it falls back to the board, the enforcement officer to do it, and the board pays liens, or just order the immediate payment.
and how many times can we continue it out? I'm trying to get to a place where we know year end.
You can continue it as many times as it pleases the board.
So we could actually, as we get closer to year end, know what our money looks like.
You can just, this is what, with the hearing officer, when we have a property owner that has limited income, but is able to do something each month, you continue to get what progress have you made. Another 30 days, come back and report.
And that's worked for you.
That's, I have one in Klamath where it took them 2 years, but they did the whole thing on their own. I didn't have to use any of that 14.
Now, this action, it would go before Judge Cater.
No, it would come here.
Okay, so there would be no administrative judicial intervention in Judge Cater's court.
No, so nothing, he's already ruled, but I don't have the money to enforce it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Is there any public comment on this matter? Any public comment? I see who- Okay, very good. So we'll bring it back to the board. It is rough when we just have the budget news that we had to find additional funding, but it is something that I would like to see this organization become a real advocate for and a real part of paying up some of the blight that we have here.
If this were the sole issue, I'm confident that the authority has cash balance available to address this one property. If this was the only thing.
So I'll make the motion to move forward on this, giving the Code Enforcement Department the authority to begin the process from our authority.
What's the process?
Mr. Mason wishes to move forward on this, and file his notice of lien, is that correct, sir?
What I heard was notice of nuisance and order to abate.
Yes. You're asking for board approval on that, that's the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Since this involves money, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Castleman,
Yes.
Commissioner DeWort,
Yes.
Chairman Holly.
Yes, thank you. Okay, discussion and possible action regarding authority support for the City of Crescent City Spring Cleanup Days, May 26th and 28th, 2015.
Okay. Yes. So we now have a chair, and a vice chair, and treasurer, controller. So the one remaining authority office is described in our joint powers agreement.
Mr. Ward, we're on 6.4.
Oops.
Please
I'm
bring
sorry,
it
I
up.
jumped. Yes, very important question. Sorry about that. That's okay. So staff recommends that we continue to approve, support the city's effort at their spring clean sweep. This will be for May 26th and 27th for brush only. And we partner with the city in that Hambro has already agreed to waive their fees for that brush. The authority would, if the board chooses to do so, waive our fees, and we split the advertising expenses. This is similar to, but different than, Recology's spring cleanup program. Recology's spring cleanup program is required under their agreement and offered to their collection customers. This spring clean event organized by the city is available to all city residents for brush only, whether or not they're a Recology customer. But it is a partnership, and we're happy to share those costs because we think it's an important community event. So staff would recommend that the board agree to waive our portion of the brush fees, and that we agree to split the advertising costs for the Clean Sweep program.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Ward?
Well,
Well, then I'll move
is there ever an opportunity that this can go countywide, you know, or at least in the urban zone? So I always feel bad that we're doing this, you know, in a 1 mile place, and we're spending solid waste authority money for a select few as opposed to the urban sphere.
The city uses their own trucks, their own staff to collect the brush materials, and it's delivered straight to the transfer station. So, of course, the authority does not have the same trucks and staffing available to do that, and I don't know if the county does, but that would be part of that discussion.
Ted, we've done this in past years. This has been a practice we've done in past years.
With the city, yes.
Yes, okay. Now, so what's the protocol on picking this up? It's bundled, it's brush, it's bundled, tied in rows, what are we talking about?
It's bundled or stacked yard and garden clippings, no garbage cans or bags, placed curbside, and they'll be picked up on May 26th, south of 9th Street, and on Wednesday, May 27th for 9th Street.
So it has to be tied in a certain manner, we don't want to have it sitting.
Bundled or stacked.
No, it doesn't have to be tied. You just have to stack it up as high as it goes. They bring by a front loader and a truck, and they'll just grab it and put it in the back of the truck. I have made piles as big as my truck, and then taken it all away. Very good. It's really impressive.
Well, we don't want to have a situation where someone's rejected and then the next day they got to get rid of it differently.
The big key is no bags, no cans, and no trash.
So I will move that we continue to participate and support the City of Crescent City Spring Cleanup Days, May 26, 28, 2015.
Oh, I'll second that. Hey, it's been moved and seconded. I neglected to ask for public comment. Does anyone want to talk about spring cleanup days? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and come back. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would just suggest that if the county wants to get on board, we do a joint cleanup on these days, because we're all heading the same place, and maybe we can use also county and city resources to clean up.
I will bring it up to CPD and hopefully we'll be on board next year.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Very good program. So, would you please poll the vote on this?
Commissioner Gitlin,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner DeWort,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleman,
Yes.
Chairman Holly.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Ward, we're now going to discussion of possible action regarding appointment of the authority secretary, clerk, and/or recording secretary.
Now in order.
Okay.
So the authority does have a chair, a vice chair, and has appointed a treasurer controller. So we are still in need of a secretary. The role of the secretary is really as an additional signature authority, as we do have our own clerk. And actually towards that end, the second part of the recommendation is to have the board direct staff to prepare a resolution for the next authority meeting, appointing Catherine Brewer as our authority clerk. The clerk's responsibilities are the taking minutes, as Karen Phillips has done well for the last year or so, and we very much appreciate her services. But because we now have staff with experience, she has served previously as a clerk for the Harbor District. We're interested in having her provide those services to the authority as well. It should also help with meeting follow-up and filing. So those are two recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Board?
Can it be taken as one motion, the two recommendations?
So long as we have an identified secretary or someone.
Then I would nominate Angela Moore.
I'm sorry. I need to ask for public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't jump in quickly enough, I don't think. Anyone want to speak to this group? Thank you. Anyone want to speak to this matter regarding the authority secretary clerk and reporting secretary? Okay, seeing that. We do have a motion from Ms. McClure. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yeah.
But I just want to clarify that Angela would be the recording secretary.
Yeah, I'm gonna make that a motion in a minute.
Okay, so does everybody understand the motion that we're on? Okay, very good. Would you please poll the vote? Karen?
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gore?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Holland?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So we have a second part of this?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to move that we appoint Commissioner Angela Gore as the secretary and direct staff to prepare a resolution for the next authority meeting, appointing Catherine Brewer as authority clerk.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that Ms. Gore, Dr. Gore, be appointed as secretary. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing that, would you please call the vote on that motion, please?
Commissioner Gore?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
And Chairman Holland?
Yes, thank you. And before we leave this matter, I want to thank Karen Phillips for all the work that she's done. She's been getting accolades from everyone, I think, and I think her head's so big she'll leave the state of Wyoming too.
Wyoming State.
Okay. Anyway, you will be missed, Karen. Thank you again for all the work you do. And,
On that note, Nicole version is the new, younger, improved me.
Oh, Nicole.
Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to her.
Thank you, Nicole. Would you stand up so we can see? Okay, very good. Thank you for coming in, and you're taking over PS.
I am.
Okay, very good. Well, we look
She's
forward
trained me
to
very well. I've thrown her under the bus at least twice.
You'll see a lot of the same faces, I think, as you circulate, but I look forward to working with you. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to 6.6, discussion and possible action regarding the authority work plan for fiscal year 2014-15.
Okay. Next slide, please. So I'm going to run through some quick rate comparison charts because they were left over after the budget discussion, but there is a chart verifying that our rates, 142.15, are somewhere between 10% and 130% below the competitors in the region. Next slide, please. Leaving the authority administrator, Delmar County Transfer Station, still with the lowest minimum charge and the lowest per ton disposal rates in all of Curry, Humboldt, and Delmar counties. Next slide, please. So looking at our overall budget, you can see that most of the revenues and expenses associated with solid waste management in Delmar County flow through Recology at over 60%. Just over 26% goes to Hambro, and Solid Waste Authority has a little over 13%. And over half of that is commitments that we've made, either to make payments on the transfer station, to fund depreciation, or to make permit fees. Overall, the authority oversees services worth nearly $6.8 million annually without receiving any tax revenues. And the authority's annual budget includes payments to Hamburg USG, which comprise about 2/3 of the authority's expenses. Next slide, please. And next slide. There we go. So I know the work plan is all in front of you. You've got the mission statement, you've got the purposes, you've got all the details, but it's a lot of words. And so I thought I would make a little brief presentation to give you an overview of how the public sees the authority and how state agencies see the authority, because I think it makes a big difference. As I've tried to explain to the board the various things that are falling behind, but in terms of how the general public views us, they probably don't notice many of those deficiencies, and I'd like to explain why that might be. So in terms of how the public sees the Solid Waste Authority, of course they see the public meetings online or perhaps reported in the newspaper. And mostly they probably see us as the people who staff the gate attendants at the Delaware County Transfer Station, the Klamath Transfer Station, and the Gaston Transfer Station. Next slide, please. So at the Delaware County Transfer Station, of course, we provide gate attendants to explain the fees and services and hand out flyers, and we promote the programs that are really only available at the transfer station, including reduced cost for brush, metals, used oil recycling, of course, a paint recycling program, our carpet recycling program, we recycle all household batteries, fluorescent tubes, televisions and CRTs, consumer electronics, household fats, oils and greases, and sharps. None of those services are available in another facility in Delaware County. There are some used oil recycling centers, but apart from that, those services are available only at the transfer station. Next slide, please. So here, Klamath Transfer Station, we provide gate attendants. We also take measures to protect public safety. We explain the fees and services. We maintain these facilities and signage. You'll see increasingly those items that are listed on red text are either deferred, behind, or receiving inadequate attention. Next slide, please. We also run the Gaston Transfer Station, and it has similar issues where we're falling behind in facilities maintenance, signage, and safety measures. Next slide, please. Public might also notice us because we provide public events such as the Household Hazardous Waste Collection event that will be coming up in September. And on the right-hand side, you see a slide showing the annual Green Ribbon Awards at the Earth Arts Fair, both of which activities have been deferred or foregone due to staffing shortages. Next slide, please. When the state agencies think of the authority, of course, their concern is often related to permit fees and compliance activities. So a lot of their focus is on the Crescent City landfill. And since folks don't dispose of their trash there anymore, this may have fallen off the public awareness radar. But nonetheless, we still have responsibilities at least through 2035 regarding monitoring, reporting, and maintenance of this facility. And those obligations are paid through a pledge of revenue for the landfill liabilities from the revenues of the Delaware County Transfer Station. This agency is responsible for permit fees and compliance, as well as planning, implementation, monitoring, and reporting on reuse, recycling, composting, special and hazardous waste programs, plus education and outreach. Administration of grants associated with used oil and other competitive grants. And once again, all those items listed in red are falling behind. Next. So other essential roles for the authority are developing service standards and contract and collections franchise oversight, and it's really due to those previous efforts that allowed us to have the rate reduction that you've all approved under the previous items. We're also responsible for adoption and enforcement of authority ordinances, as Paul just discussed. And we're responsible for responding to proposed new legislation or regulation, future planning related to integrated waste management, budgeting and fiscal administration, and personnel management. So that's an overview, and of course there's more detail in the work plan, but it summarizes much of the same points, which is we have responsibilities, and then currently we're falling behind in meeting them. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I was concerned about those things were falling behind, and I just kind of colored in those that had the X's, and it's alarming. Hopefully we can figure out a solution to this. And we thought it's good to do this. For those that haven't been sitting here, you know, we gave a stab at doing a strategic plan and it seemed overwhelming at first. So this is really our temporary answer to a strategic plan. We thought now might be time to review it, especially for you. So, any questions of Mr. Ward regarding the authority work plan for 2014-15?
I'll just weigh in that we should be taking, as soon as we're up to full personnel and everything's moving forward, I think that future planning and integrated waste management and focusing on legislation is just such a big priority, because I think that we're going to see some new movement as the California budget gets better. I think we're going to see some more solid waste.
If I might follow up on that, one of the things I detailed in my director's report, which I hope you all had a chance to read, but we're a partner with the California Product Stewardship Council, and working with them has helped us establish our battery recycling program, our carpet recycling program, and our expanded paint recycling program. So those are really good things, but we received an urgent appeal to weigh in on two bills that were pending before the legislature. They're AB 1159, and they would suggest that we oppose AB 45. And I'm highlighting these because they really show two very different approaches towards solid waste management, particularly hazardous waste management. AB 1159 would implement needed statewide product stewardship programs for household batteries and home-generated sharps. In contrast, AB 45 places all program and financial responsibilities on local governments, requiring each jurisdiction that provides the residential collection and disposal of solid waste to increase the collection of household hazardous waste by an unspecified percentage. AB 45 would also require each jurisdiction to submit an additional annual report to the state. Now, unfortunately, there was no time to draft either of those letters, but they're really different approaches. One is a product stewardship program for things that are a problem for us now, which means that the funds for managing those would be collected when a person buys those products. The other strategy in AB 45 is, okay, we need to collect more hazardous waste. Local governments take care of it. You're responsible for collecting an X additional percentage, report back to us. All the financing, all the responsibilities entirely on local government. This is exactly why the previous boards have so adamantly supported product stewardship, because local governments simply cannot afford to manage hazardous waste according to the law and make it reasonably convenient. At this point in time, we only have a single collection event that collects all the hazardous materials. It's only open from 9 to 2, so that's a few hours each year when you can dispose of solvents and outdated medicine, the things that we can't take every single day. But our voice on these issues is at this point silenced because we don't have staff to weigh in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding? Okay. Any public comment on the authority work plan? Mr. Mason.
Dave Mason, resident of the county. Thank you. Mr. Ward mentioned briefly some of the things that are handled at the hazardous waste cleanup. Of course, pesticides, herbicides, those sort of things. And I know from my experience that if there's no legal place to take the residue, they're left with two options. One is use up the rest of it, which puts it into the environment, or to dump it someplace really stupid like in a creek where it kills the fish. So if there's not a way to deal with this stuff on a regular routine basis, then it goes someplace where it shouldn't be and has a severe negative effect. There was a recent article in the paper about a reduction of toxics in the river or whatnot. That's the kind of impact, I'm not saying that's what caused that, but those are the kind of impacts you get when there's no legitimate, proper place for it to go. It ends up in our environment and filters down.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Other public comment?
Catherine Marion, resident city. I'd like to support Mr. Ward's comments regarding weighing in on legislative matters. I sit on the legislative committee committee for the Redwood Empire Division for the League of California Cities. And we are very active in paying attention to pieces of legislation that go through, would affect and impact the cities. And it's very important that you weigh in for issues that would impact this body, and when it impacts the cities, when we have things that come through, especially unfunded mandates that we as a city oftentimes weigh in and say we oppose a piece of legislation that would be unfavorable to local control, for example, or an unfunded mandate. So I support what Mr. Ward was saying regarding being able to be active in sending pieces of opposition or favoring certain legislation from this body. I think it's very, very important, and you need to have enough staff to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments?
Elizabeth Henry, I live in the county, and I'm overwhelmed looking at this list. I've gone over it and over trying to kind of place things, and it is overwhelming to try to figure out how to get all this done. I think Ted has really pointed out all the really very important critical points. I don't know if you mentioned the one about securing future disposal capacity. That's another thing that needs to be done, and a new contract signed. So that was one of those. But I just looked at the last couple of pages, deferred discretionary activity. You know, and it's too bad that things like competitive grants, which can help this agency do things, are deferred discretionary activities, because I think discretionary changes its meaning when in this situation we have right now. I mean, it isn't that it's not needed, it's just there really isn't time. So there were a number of things that the public would like to see: the convenient location for businesses for recycling oil. I think supported extended producer responsibility talked about, and that is really critical with the upcoming mattress recycling. And the advocacy has been talked about. Procurement policies. I mean, there's just a list of things that really shouldn't be on the last 2 pages. I mean, they should move forward somewhere so they can be done too. And lastly, I'll just say some of these also have to do with cooperating with other counties, like Humboldt. We're a small area. Working with other counties can help to work on big problems and sharing resources, personnel, and anyway, I just see these things all as very critical and not just discretionary. Thank you.
Other public comments?
It seems that we should weigh in on 1845 because it appears that it's already gone to appropriations and standing committee. So no, we don't want. We want to continue with being able to fund product stewardship through the producer of the waste as opposed to the counties. And we've fought for a long time to keep that out. I know it's something that's rose subsequent to the publishing of the agenda, but it seems that this is information that could be, to have a standing committee on appropriations, which sometimes that's one of the green lights that's getting ready to shoot out to make it a law. So I would move that we add this to the agenda as it rose subsequent to the posting of the agenda.
I have to say, I haven't done a lot of that. Is that a process that we should use, Martha? Do we just pick? Can we place something?
We can add something if the need for it arose, since posting of the agenda, and it requires immediate or nearly immediate.
So first we have a motion and a second
To add it to the
To add it to the
agenda?
agenda, and then we can discuss it thereafter.
Yes, and adding it to the agenda will require a ordinance vote.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
yes.
We're moving to the saltwater and freshwater back and forth. I don't see it addressed here anything about ordinance. And I refer to the word ordinance, not ordinance, meaning the discarded flares. And what's being done.
In the work plan, you mean?
Well, yes, but I'm reminded by the fact that private citizen Mason came up and drew the fact that we have toxins being dumped, possibly because we don't have an alternative. And I know this is an ongoing problem. What about these expired, unused flares? Where are they going? Are they being dumped out into the Pacific? No one really addresses that.
With respect, it is in the work plan. It's
I'm
on-
sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's on the bottom of page 7 of 12.
Thank you. And I think, and as a point of order, I think we probably need to, like, maybe finish up.
Maybe there's
the
not
work
a
plan.
second.
Okay, wait, but in the middle of the discussion, okay, we have a motion to go ahead and add AB 45 response to the agenda because it came up subsequent to the publishing of the agenda. Is there a second? I'll second. Okay, moving second. Oh, I don't take this off.
Well, you do later when you want to bring it back.
Very good, thank you. You learn every day. And, Mr. Gibbon, I didn't make a good job.
No, I'm seeing here, I missed that because I looked at this, I did not see this here. So let's talk about this explanation of this motion and what it's going to do and why we need to put this vote on this council.
So is there any other discussion among the commissioners regarding the work plan?
For the work plan?
Yes,
Okay.
we'd like to dispose basically.
Yes. So I wanted to say that I do share a lot of the concerns that have already been raised, and I wanted to just sort of emphasize Mr. Mason's point that if you do not have product stewardship programs for materials, not only do they end up getting dumped, but there is a lot of anthropological research about when they get dumped. They get dumped in the week after the household hazardous waste because people realize that they missed it. They don't want to wait another year, and that's when it gets dumped en masse, and that's a real problem. And we really need to be addressing that and not let that be a priority that falls by the wayside.
Kristen, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the discussion on the authority work plan. Do you need action on the authority work plan? Is this possible action?
Unless there is any significant change or any removal of items, it's intended to be a communication and a working document.
Okay, well, we'll work on it.
Just as Mr. Gitlin correctly pointed out, marine flares are something that the board has mentioned is a priority and it should be something in the work plan. Indeed it is.
Okay, thank you. So I think at this time, it's a good time to segue into the what was the number? It was AB 45?
AB 45, yes.
And weigh in and possibly giving staff direction to make a response to that legislation. Is there any public comment on the AB 45 issue? Yes.
Because it's after 5. David, President of the county, fully support letting the legislation know that AB 45 is an exceptionally bad idea because it would severely cripple our efforts to keep our environment clean and safe.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No other public comment? Any other discussion by the commission?
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
We have I believe we have a first and a second to add this item to the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to hold a vote and get a minimum of 4 votes to add it.
Let's do that. Would you please hold the vote
Sorry.
whether or not to add the item to the agenda? I thought we had.
Can I ask you a question before we're moving? I just pulled this up on my website, it's here, all the details. So, I know it's after 5.
Okay, Mr. Gibbons,
I'd like this question.
it could be first added to the agenda. We haven't officially even added it to the agenda yet. We just need to vote to add it to the agenda, and then we
Well, it's on the exact motion. I'm,
No, we're adding it to the
okay,
agenda.
I think Supervisor McClure heard it. I'd like to see if we can clarify this thing before we take a vote.
Okay, so you want
I
to
have a
have
question with regard to what Code Enforcement Officer Mason just said, that he is opposing this implementation of AB 45 on the work plan. Did I hear that correctly? No, I just want to make sure I heard what I think you just said.
Again, I need, as chair, I need to do a point of order. Can we please pull the vote on adding it to the agenda before we pursue more conversation? So would you please do that?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Glore?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
And Chairman Hall?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Mason, you can return to the, thank you. And Mr. Gibbon, I'm sorry.
So, originally, I was to see my comment was intended to support adding it to the agenda for discussion.
Right.
And now that it's on the agenda, if you want to take public comment on here, I'd be happy to go into at length why it's a good idea.
Okay.
So, as previously said, there is an mass dumping after the event because people go to the transfer station and they're told, sorry, not today. And somewhere between the transfer station and getting home, they lose it. It's no longer with them. And there's no appropriate place between there and home, so we don't win the wrong place. With product stewardship, there's funding up front collected when the product is sold, much like with tires and televisions and these sort of things, and batteries. Any legislation that puts that onus back on local government to deal with out of their own budget is probably the worst idea in a long, sad history of bad ideas. It's the manufacturer that's making it, the retailer that's selling it, and the person that's buying it should be funding the proper disposal of the remnants and the leftovers and the waste, not the rest of the world. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Ward, do you have anything to add?
Well, absolutely. Now that this has been added to the agenda, I would be delighted to, and staff would recommend writing a letter of opposition regarding AB 45. This is a remarkably bad bill.
Okay. So we've had public comment, we've had your comments. Any other discussion here? I would entertain a motion.
Sorry.
Yes.
I would also make the request that we send our opposition to both the County Board of Supervisors and the City of Crescent City, asking that they too find opposition to this bill.
Okay, so the motion has been modified, or do we need a motion? Or we just, no, we're just giving staff direction. Okay, direction. You're all with that? Okay with that change? Mr. Gitlin? Okay. Thank you. Look forward to seeing that. So, the next matter, 6.7, is everybody okay with continuing on? Nobody needs a break? Okay, 6.7, discussion and possible action regarding the recruitment and/or appointment of the authority director. And in looking and listening to the interviews we had at the last meeting and evaluating that we have not actually moved forward since October, at which time I think that was the last action that was taken, was to move toward an interim director, and that really didn't get done, and I'm as responsible as anyone on that. I think this is something important to keep before us until this happens one way or another. And I think that's the community's expectation, and I know that it's my expectation. So we have a kind of a broad-based staff report, and ask Mr. Ward to kind of take us through.
Sure. Be delighted. Oops, hello. Okay. So at the October 2014 board meeting, discussion was held regarding the process to draft a request for proposals and direction to staff regarding the process, description, benefits, etc. for an interim director. A committee was suggested for review of the position, scope of work, employees versus independent contractor, and part-time versus full-time. Questions regarding the position. Commissioners Holly and Sullivan were appointed by the chairman to come up with a draft scope of work. So as Mr. Sullivan no longer serves as the commissioner for the authority board and no further progress has been made, it's necessary to revisit this issue. Shortly after the sudden retirement of the former director in July 2013, the board at the time assured me that this situation where I was asked to work two jobs would be resolved in weeks, not months. From the perspective of authority staff, the protracted staffing shortage is now approaching a state of crisis. The intent of this agenda item is to find the most cost-effective and timely method to achieve a full staffing level so we can train the new hire to begin addressing the backlog of tasks that have accumulated since the sudden retirement of the former director 21 months ago. The previous board was discussing various options which were never brought to fruition and which are currently not being pursued. In order for the new board to give staff clear direction to resolve the situation, I have outlined all the possible options that were under discussion, whether or not they have been properly analyzed or prepared. Depending on the option selected, having the staff vacancy or position actually filled might take anywhere between 1 to 2 months or 1 to 2 years. So to clarify board direction, staff requests the board answer the following questions and respond to the letter items as needed. So the first question, is the board's intent to maintain the staffing level in the most recently adopted staffing chart budget? Oh, next slide, please. So that's the current staffing chart, and you can see the director position is vacant. But the first question is essentially, is the board's intent to maintain a separate program manager and authority director position?
Oh, are you asking for, what I would suggest is all of us, and I think the public needs to know what all of the options are that we're outlining, and maybe we then move back.
I'm sorry. I will go over that.
Thank you.
So, in the R3 report, they reached, of course, some very positive, important conclusions, such as the Delaware Solid Waste Management Authority is a single joint powers authority serving both Delaware County and the city of Crescent City, is the most efficient entity for managing solid waste-related functions in Delaware County. That the current authority staff has the expertise and experience to effectively handle required solid waste management functions. That the Delaware County Transfer Station is well run and well maintained, and that the authority staff are meeting all regulatory requirements in a timely and comprehensive manner, or that was the case in May 2014. In the R3 report, they presented several options for addressing staffing, including maintaining the current management and administrative staffing levels, to reduce the management and administrative staffing levels to support the status quo, to contract the executive director position, or to contract the scale house staffing for the private sector. The R3 report specifically acknowledged that options 2 and 4 require further analysis or legal opinion, and since option 3 depends on option 2, that also requires additional analysis. So prior to combining these positions, the authority needs to review the job responsibilities of both positions, eliminate or defer non-essential tasks, and delegate certain other required tasks to administrative staff, the county and/or Recology and Ham Road WSG, where that can be done efficiently and effectively to the benefit of the authority. So essentially, the options they laid out that combined the director and program manager positions would require that there be some adjustment to the job description and/or work plan for the authority. So if the intent of the board is to combine the positions, then part of that intent should be to identify what tasks are no longer going to be the responsibility of this agency, or which of those responsibilities are to be shifted to other agencies, and how we're to go about that. If the board does not intend to reduce the workload, then the board's intent should be to flesh out staff according to the current staffing chart. So getting back to those 4 questions that are on the page 2 of the staff report, I'll now stop talking. And if the board requests any further clarification, I'd be happy to chime in.
Well, I was thinking maybe we go through the options that we outlined here, and only add that none of us are bound by only these options. These are the options that were kind of pointed out by R3, and you know, we could do something different and creative if we chose to. But maybe could you read for the record the different options 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
The options as presented in the R3 report, and again, these options, specifically R3 acknowledged in the report that the question of what are the appropriate management and administrative staffing levels for the authority was not specifically asked, and regardless cannot be definitively answered at this point. So R3 was basically saying, what is the appropriate staffing? We can't tell you. But In that context, they offer these four options. Maintain the current management and administrative staffing levels. Reduce management and administrative staffing levels to support the status quo. And again, I'm not sure what that would mean, because the status quo has us falling behind, as I've clearly demonstrated. So I don't know how combining those two would support the status quo, but that is the option as they laid it out. The other is to contract the executive director position, which essentially still combines the two, but then offers it as a private contractor. And then the fourth is to contract scale-house staffing to the private sector. All of those options will provide a more comprehensive analysis of the staff response to the R3 report.
Great, thank you. So on page 2 of your staff report, you were suggesting that we take yes or no votes on number 1, is the board's intent to maintain the staffing level in the most recent adopted staffing chart budget, which you referred to. Number 2, is the board's intent to hire an interim or permanent director? And if so, if the board chooses to hire an interim director, staff request appointment of 2 commissioners to continue referring the job description, pay range, etc. for presentation at the next authority meeting. 3, if the board's intent is to hire a permanent director, does the board wish to combine the director and the program manager positions? And again, you talked about the shifting of work. And if those work is to be combined, we address the meet and confer requirements of the union relative to yourself. So that would make sense. And then 4, if the board intends to maintain current staff levels, both the director and program manager positions, does the board want to open the executive director position to outside applicants? And what would be the recruitment or selection processes associated with that? Because that would be a kind of a complex thing, because ordinarily when we hire, you'd be fielding the questions and all that, and it's obviously improper if in fact you're one of the candidates. So we have some work to do if we chose that option. So we are wanting kind of a roundtable discussion here, and hopefully we can come to maybe not consensus, but we can at least arrive at a direction that this board wants to go. So I'm interested in hearing what the board has to say.
I'll start off. I believe that someone has been interviewing for the director's job for the last 21 months. And that he's been in the authority for 20 plus years. He knows it in and out. It's a unique authority, so we can't bring anybody in here with a cookie cutter and just put them in and hope that they run the same way we do. And if this candidate can actually help with the staffing shortage, get the authority back up to where its feet where it belongs, and keep it within the budget, then there's no problem with me recommending that Ted Ward become not the acting director, but the permanent director for the Solid Waste Management Authority.
Thank you. Is that a motion or a comment?
I thought we were round table.
That's what I think.
I'll make a motion. You need it.
You know how to move things along. Okay.
My comments are much the same, and I just wanted to say, Mr. Lonsdale, I believe, that I am endeavoring to be as hardworking as Mary Wilson. I have read every word of my board packet. I went through the R3 report very carefully. I read all of the comments that were attached to it, and most of the appendices, although I skipped the Cal Recycle inspection forms. And I came to much the same conclusion as Commissioner Gastineau, which is that we have had somebody acting in the director position for 21 months. The R3 report suggested that the current staff has the expertise and experience to do the job with very few criticisms. I think that 21 months for an interim is long enough. If we tried to open it up to an outside search, it would take a long time. There would be an even longer learning curve, and I would concur that we should make Mr. Ward the actual official director. In addition, I have been thinking about the R3 report's thoughts about restructuring some of the other staffing positions, and I wonder if we are in a position now to be able to make that decision because there is such a backlog. And so from my perspective, what seemed to be reasonable would be to perhaps hire an interim program manager for a year, full-time, let that backlog be caught up, and in 8 months after that person has taken their position, then return to this idea of, are there some tasks that can be moved around? Does that position need to be filled full-time permanently? Could it be reduced? What are those options? But I think that right now, with the backlog that we have, we need that full staffing to get back up to speed, and then we can reflect back on what might be needed in the future.
Thank you.
We're going down chronological.
Anyway, it's a breath of fresh air to hear the statements because I was full of angst on where we were going to go and what was going to happen. And I would just like to weigh in with my support that I feel that that's a great plan, and I really like the idea of getting our director feet on the ground, temporarily holding that program manager's position as a possible interim until the new director can actually do an analysis of all of the different spokes of this agency that need to be addressed and see how we can address them. I also want to say that this position is so important because of the outside reach that the director needs to make. That it's not just the day-to-day stuff, it's that reach to the Product Stewardship Council, it's that reach to CalRecycle, it's that reach to our assemblyman, and it's the reach to our state senator. So all of those to me take priority. And I agree that the idea of waiting longer for an agency that has a tremendous job to do and has been hobbled for a number of years, not just the past 2 years, but it's been hobbled for a number of years of people possibly not understanding the significance of the oversight that the authority gives to 2 required elements of solid waste collection. And that oversight is required, and that's already now finally been put to bed. So for me, it's just a grand opportunity to take a look at what are the possibilities instead of what are the problems. I want to look at the possibilities. So I support that discussion going on in the county. Thank you.
I guess it's what's not said that disturbs me, but I'm looking at these options, which we've not selected an option on here. I'm going right to the director, but I'm learning something new that Ted was interested in this job. I had not heard that prior to this meeting. But in option 1, maintain current management and administrative staff levels. What was not read is I'll give you the exact verbiage. In option 1, based on the interviews with the authority commissioners, we meaning R3, believe the commissioner's goal for the authority are in fact more modest and would be better served by selecting option 2 or option 3, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. Both of these options would be expected to result in reducing staffing costs, likely in excess of $100,000 annually. Now I know we've all read this, but to not read this and put this into the record, that option 2 and 3 will save the authority about $100,000 annually is something, from a fiduciary standpoint, why wouldn't we want that? Now, the executive director goes on, here it is in option 2. The executive director and program manager positions be combined into a single full-time solid waste manager position. That position would assume the current responsibilities of those 2 separate positions. This again is all R3 quotations. It hasn't been read, I'll read it now. Based on our review, we believe that such a consolidation of responsibilities could be effectively achieved, although prior to doing so, the authority should review the job responsibilities of both of these positions, eliminate or defer non-essential tasks, and delegate certain other required tasks to administrative staff accordingly. the county and/or ecology, Hambro WSG, Hambro, where they can be done effectively to the benefit of the authority. Now, 3 is essentially the same, option 3, only it's on a contract, not an employee basis. Now, again, what disturbs me is if we move to my colleagues who'd all want to appoint Mr. Ward as the director, how does he do an RFP if he is in fact vying for the position? Are we going to do an RFP? Or are we just bypassing that entirely? We're going right to, let's hire a director. And I find that troubling in terms of missing monies that have not fully been addressed, and we're going back to the same model we had before. What did we pay $33,000 for if we're just going to plain out not ignorance? So I asked my colleagues that. I'm not on support of doing this, and I hope that you all look at this carefully, where the savings can be realized. Problems have been cleared, and are all the clouds removed so we can move forward and actually have this agency operate in an effective way.
Thank you, Mr. Gitlin. Since I became chair, and even before that, I was thinking a lot about what we do about the executive director position. And being an old human resources guy, under normal circumstances, I would be absolutely insisting we go out and find the best possible candidate for this position. But I also know that there have been a number of organizations that have tried to hire high-level people in the recent past, and it's been difficult to bring them to Crescent City. And I don't know if we have a lot of candidates here locally that could be competitive. So that puts that puts both the learning curve and people on the ground. My guess is 8 to 9 months out, and that may sound like a lot, but I'm concerned that you use the word crisis several times tonight, and it seems to me like we're approaching a crisis point, and I'm concerned that we maybe can't afford to go out that far. I want to avoid a discussion that Mr. Ward has earned the position, but in fact, you have kept this organization moving forward, or at least treading water until we can get to a place where we have enough staffing. And I also, before I go forward, want to say that I appreciate the difficult decision-making you've made to be a candidate. Because when you're a public employee and you have the benefits and the security of being a public employee and you move over to an at-will position, that's a rough transition for many people. And it hasn't been a smooth road for you over the last couple of years. So I appreciate how brave this interest that you have is. So I don't think, given Mr. Ward's interest, that we can afford not to move forward with Mr. Ward's appointment. I do understand what Mr. Gitlin's saying about the R3 report there, and we did, I think, what the R3 report did overall was validate that this is the right vehicle for solid waste management in our community. And with due respect, that was worth $33,000 because I think the structure was starting to crumble prior to that report. So if nothing else, that was beneficial. And it has a lot of information we can continue to use as we move toward managing our issues. But seeing the work plan and seeing the important things that are being deferred and undergoing the possibility of penalties because we're not dealing with our water stuff at the landfill, I just don't think we can afford to wait much longer. So I will ask for public comment on this. Yes.
Elizabeth Henry, I live in the county. I've been waiting 21 months to have this item on the agenda. I don't know anybody in public service that's had a 21-month probationary period. And that's what it's been, and I think Mr. Ward has passed that with flying colors. As far as to the R3 reports, option 2 is what's happening right now. We don't have to test it. We have combined the program manager and the director, and it doesn't work. Look at that work plan. What else do we have to do? So I think that reason is out the window. This brought me to look at R3 again, and it's really interesting with a little perspective. It was the commissioners who said that there should be a more modest authority. How about the community? Nobody, every time I came to the meetings here, the community said, we want recycling, we want it to grow, we want our programs to get better. No one said, could you scale back a little bit maybe and, make it a little more modest? That was a majority of 3 on the board through the years that the last 21 months that did that. So that's really not, I don't think it's a point that should even be made. I'm surprised R3 as professionals made it was such a limited group of people that they got that from. As far as saving $100,000, I gave this little speech before where I looked at fiscal year, I think it was 13-14, and how much money you saved. Nothing. You paid for extra hours for the treasurer, for legal services, other professional services. That was not money saved, and that's going to continue to happen if you've got one person struggling to do this job. And look at it. Someone that has to go out to the landfill and do water testing also has to do the budget. I mean, that's a real different set of skills, and you keep, and we're asking one person to do all of that, and it's not working. You see that from the work plan. So I really hope you will go ahead and vote yes on making Ted Ward the permanent director. Thank you.
Murray, I'm a resident of the city, and I thank the 4 of you for your positive approach to appointing Mr. Ward as your director. It's long past due, as you all know, and I'm hoping that you will do that tonight. Mr. Gitlin, your feet are set in cement, and now it's dry. You're going nowhere, and this is not a good thing. I hope that you will change your mind and move with the rest of the board, because this is the only right thing to do. We do need a program manager, as Ms. Galore said, and as Ms. Henry said, they're different skill sets. So hallelujah, thank you for your vision, and I'm very, very happy. Thank you.
Other public comments?
Dave Mason, President of the county. Just a couple of observations. One, something my grandfather told me a long time ago. You can't put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag.
That's good.
One person can't do the whole thing by themselves. The other thing is when John Kennedy said we're going to the moon, there's a whole bunch of people that said we can't because we don't have X. And he said, that's great that you brought that up. Now we know we need to go to the moon. There will always be, hopefully, somebody that says we shouldn't do this because X. And it shouldn't necessarily always be the same person, but if something comes up that doesn't look right, bring it up, discuss it, because if it's something that can be dealt with, then deal with it. The problem that we have with Sutter is because people rubber stamp, and never question what Sutter was doing until it got to the point where it is. If somebody had stood up and said, hey, this doesn't look right, let's talk about it, perhaps we wouldn't be in that boat now. So when there's disagreement on the board, and it's simple disagreement and intelligent discussion, it makes perfect sense. And those are just some observations that I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Bill Lonsdale again. I hope that those members of the Commission who have been studying the R3 report are having fun doing that. It's very entertaining. But I think everybody in this room probably knows the pressure that R3 was under from the board as it existed at that time. And a lot of the findings in that report reflect the sentiments of the board, of the commission majority at that time. But as has been pointed out, we have some experience with some of those recommendations being implemented, and it isn't pretty. So I would request that my representative on the commission reconsider his current position. I would also recommend, though, that because this is going to be very controversial in the community, as you know, there's a large contingent out there who want the authority stripped of its power, stripped of its capability, and returned to something more simple and maybe even privatized. So whatever process you go through to staff the authority sufficiently for it to do its job and end the death of 1,000 cuts that Mr. Ward has been going through for all these months, the proper procedure has to be followed. And I don't know what that procedure is, but someone with HR experience hardly does. So don't move too swiftly. Make sure you do it right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring this back to the board. You know, I don't know how this will go, but whether it's Mr. Ward or someone else, and if the choice is to move forward with a full-time executive director, which is probably the first step we should make, there'll need to be a revised, we need to rework the job description. I suppose there'll need to be contracts done, so there'll be more work. So if someone here wants to make a motion, it should probably include next steps within that motion. Martha, did you have something to say regarding that?
My suggestion, if the board wanted to move in the direction that was suggested, in appointing, perhaps appointing, or at least considering appointing Mr. Ward as the executive director, that we direct legal counsel and perhaps 2 members of the commission to work together to create a contract and revised job description to bring back for the board's consideration.
Okay, that's well said. So I don't know what everyone's pleasure is, but I'm open to it.
I know that my first one is that I would like to move that we move in the direction of hiring a permanent director. I'm going to try to chunk this up and stuff.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we hire a full-time permanent director. I needed to insert full-time, I think, because it's at one point we were talking about this. So a full-time executive director for the Solid Waste Management Authority. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, this is important, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Bloor,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin,
No.
and Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Chairman Holly.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And so that's a big step. That's a big step. Biggest step we've done in 21 months, possibly. Next step is what's your pleasure relative to recruitment and or assignment?
I move that we appoint Ted Ward as the permanent director for the Solid Waste Management Authority forthwith, after consulting with our attorney.
And before we have a second, I know that council had some suggestions about additions to that kind of a motion.
If that is the board's pleasure, I would suggest directing staff, or not staff per se, legal counsel and 1 or 2 commissioners to work on drafting that contract, which would include the job description, and bringing it back at the next meeting where, by approving that contract, would at that time appoint Mr. Ward as the director.
Okay.
So I'll amend my motion to council's advice. Thank you. And if I get a second, that'd be great.
Okay, so I think that everyone understands the motion, I hope. Okay. So we're waiting for a second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Mr. Ward be appointed as the Executive Director of the Solid Waste Management Authority, subject to drafting a job description and a completed contract. So, I guess,
I would just like a friendly inclusion or a friendly amendment, and I would like that the two commissioners be Ron Gastineau and Angela Glore. They're willing.
I don't agree to that.
I can do that.
so that's amended then? We amended both the first and the second? Okay, very good. Again, any further discussion? Okay, now let's go forward with the vote.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin,
No.
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
and Chairman Collins.
Yes, thank you very much, congratulations. Probably more importantly, we're going to take about a 3-minute recess so we can refresh ourselves.
Come on, shake hands.
We can take it.
It's cold.
Thanks. We still have got to It's been a long way.
Do I get the whole boss now?
You do, and thank you for we'll review it. Recording. Done this
These
before.
guys are amateurs.
Compared to the Harbor District? Okay. Keep track of that. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys need to work on mixing up your motions.
Sure, we can do that.
I knew I needed to.
Usually have a common routine in the city. Yeah, go through the chambers here and the door on that side. Yeah, there's these are the closed chambers in the back.
How do you spell your last name? I want to make sure that I got it. How do you spell your last name?
You have good handwriting too, I wish I could do that. When I was a sophomore in high school, during the Eisenhower administration, my friends suggested that I get a typewriter. That's made ever since.
Well, I have heard that they don't teach cursive in school anymore.
No, Vermont, Chris.
I know some of my younger coworkers, it's very hard for me to read their writing.
But Palmer would go over this.
Yeah, he did sit down there for a long time. He was like, this is a record, this, I played in that concert tournament. He said, you played around 12 this year before you did.
Because I'm.
You take care of all of them?
Great. It's really cool. You're still sitting there, really.
Or no place else to go.
Yeah.
I can check you
Well, I
off.
think we're going to right. I can make those things go quick.
Angela, what's your schedule?
Well, I'm starting right now. I, given direction myself to how to proceed, so I can say it.
There's no action on those.
Okay, yeah, so just go ahead.
I'll be quick for what's easy.
Lons thinks you're still here. We'll be back. I checked. Sorry. We'll put you on the email list. Okay. So it is, 5:46, and we're going ahead and reconvene. And thank you for that quick break. I think for some of us it was absolutely necessary. Mr. Ward, would you take us through the directors and treasurers reports?
Yes, and since none of these require board action, I presume you all have had a chance to read it. I'd be happy to run through this quickly, and if you have any questions, we'll follow up with that. So, addressing the ongoing staffing shortage, we hired 2 part-time temporary additional refugee site attendants, Bonnie Smith and Joseph Hernandez. They both begun training, and looking forward to having that all work out. So, training there's a lot to learn. There's a lot it's much more than a simple cashier job. There's a lot of details, and so it does take a while before a person's really familiar with working in Delaware County Transfer Station, let alone being able to do that and cycle through the Gasky and Clemens transfer stations as need be. I've met with Wes White and Joel Wallen, as well as Gary Penning of Road Waste Systems in the Dry Creek landfill. Although the authority is a third-party beneficiary to the disposal agreement between Hambro WSG and Dry Creek, we have an obligation under state law to have at least 15 years of disposal capacity secured. When we drop below that 15-year threshold, we need to offer a more detailed explanation about what we're doing to secure that. So we had 15 years of capacity as of March 2015. So we now have less than 15 years capacity. But as it turns out, Hambro WSG's agreement will expire sooner than our disposal agreement with Rogue Valley Disposal at this point. Meaning that this is the time to either consider an extension or consider a different way to approach how we secure our disposal capacity. But this issue will be discussed in greater detail probably next month. So we'll bring that back. I just want to let you know we are working on that. Timely compliance and sampling and reporting deadlines continue to be a challenge. Some of the data entry under the GeoTracker system is 3 months overdue. And of course, there's an additional listing of things that we've done, things that we plan on doing, and a minutes from the statewide conference call regarding marine flares. We continue to try to chip away at that. Also attached to this report is a really nice piece from Jeremy Herbert of Recology about what they're trying to do to address illegal dumping around the community recycling bins. So I certainly applaud and support those efforts. Looking at our balance sheet, and I'll look to the treasurer in case I say anything wrong, but our cash balance at this point is $651,301 plus the $198,177 for the iBank loans. Looking at our AR summary, I just discussed this with our administrative assistant, Lisa Babcock, and she's doing a really great job keeping our accounts receivable to a minimum. And she's made some follow-up phone calls. Everything over 90 days has already been referred to collections. And we're expecting a check very soon from one of our larger pieces. And she assures me that at this point, we brought down our current AR balance way down. It's below 36,000. This looks a little bit larger because Recology's payments haven't been received at the time it was printed. But we have brought that down. Looking at the claims approved by director, once again, you'll notice that the largest payment, once again, goes to Hambro as every month. We did have some additional expenses going through paying the community development department for some of our work out at the landfill. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I guess I'll finish up by saying that looking at our authority revenue, our service fees are $7,271 ahead of projections, and our franchise fees are $5,760 behind projections. So more or less, we're meeting our projections in terms of what we expect for revenue. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Ward? Thank you. Going forward, should we deal with these in order?
I think this is really fast. I've asked Mr. Mason to stay just because he and I work together on drafting this agreement and making sure that it's right. But the bottom line is, this board also serves as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority. And so to take this item, we actually need to go through the steps that our council will discuss.
Thank you. So we'll then, since it's a whole different entity, we'll adjourn the Solid Waste Management Authority and convene as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority. So I call this meeting to order. Would you please take roll?
Commissioner Gastineau.
Here.
Commissioner Ford.
Here.
Commissioner McClure.
Here.
Commissioner Gilman.
Here.
And Chairman Holland.
Here. Thank you very much.
So this is the RFP that we had discussed previously. Essentially, the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority reimburses for the towing vehicles and that are abandoned, and it gets money through a $1 per car registration fee. And so essentially that is a pool of money that's available to the city and the county. We have a towing contract, and upon reviewing the terms of that agreement, Mr. Mason had some suggestions about how we might be able to approve it. And so we gave notice to termination, and now staff are recommending that we release this RFP and then come back at a subsequent meeting to review the proposals that are received.
Okay, thank you. Does Mr. Mason want to address? Did you want to take us through that, or the highlights of it, or?
Actually, I was just planning on answering questions if they're ready, but I can give you just a brief why this occurred. It is that in keeping with mission statement, to do as much as we can with what resources we have, and analyzing how the money was spent in this current fiscal year, because we ran out, used up every last dime of it. There appeared to be an opportunity to where we could make some adjustments to reduce the costs of dealing with the abandoned motorhomes, abandoned travel trailers, that sort of thing. So that's the ultimate goal. Problem is the current contract doesn't allow the flexibility to do that. And there were some questions about how a couple of vehicles were abated and why the costs were so high. There wasn't any way to track why there was an anomaly on the line item when we did the bills. So, we need a little tighter control on how these are handled, where they go, what happens to them, and how they're ultimately disposed of. And so, Ted and I got together, this is a draft that we came up with that we think will do a better job of that and give us the tools we need to go forward to reduce the overall abatement cost, which will enable both the city and the county to remove more abandoned vehicles per year.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay.
I know that we've agreed that if it's full of trash, the code enforcement of that entity will remove the trash. Is that a huge issue, or is that?
So let me back this up. So when American Towing had the contract, Ed understood that the less money we spent on disposal, the more money was available for towing. And so he went out of his way to keep the disposal costs down. And if that meant driving through the transfer station with the vehicle on the truck and sweeping it onto the floor so that I had to pay somebody to go to his yard to clean it, he was all for that, and he did not charge extra for that service. Unfortunately, I had some medical issues and had to leave the towing business, and the only company that stepped up really was Northcrest, and the current contract didn't mandate that level of service, and so it was not provided. And so we're looking at ways to increase our level of service for the amount that we pay, essentially.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comments on the abandoned, the request for proposals for towing, storage, recovery, and disposal of abandoned vehicles. As the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority, we have some before us. Any public comments on it? Okay, we'll bring it back here to the commission. What's your pleasure?
I move that we release the request for proposal for towing, storage, recovery, and disposal of abandoned vehicles.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to second regarding the request for proposals. Any further discussion? Okay, very good. Please poll the vote.
Commissioner Gitlin.
Yes.
Commissioner McClure.
Yes.
Commissioner Fluor.
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau.
Yes.
Chairman Holly.
Yes. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and call that meeting, there's nothing else to do with the authority. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the authority meeting, the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority. We'll go ahead and close that meeting, and we'll reconvene as the Solid Waste Management Authority. The only matter left on our agenda is a very brief closed session. We don't anticipate reporting out, but you're welcome to stay and see what happens.
I would just like to add one
Yes.
thing for the director, Mr. Ward. Looking at this nice mess that Angela has over here, and the rest of us have our iPads and computers, we should re-look at getting the public member an iPad if she wishes to have one.
I would happily save trees.
We can make that arrangement.
All right, so it's just one more thing I have to put in the budget that, I can find more
We
money.
will make it happen.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close, well, we can't really close, we're going to close the meeting, go to closed session, and then we'll come back and report out in just a few minutes. But again, it'll be brief. Thank you everyone for staying. I'll be
She left me a note. I don't think we should be recording a closed session.
You know, actually, the thought has crossed our mind before. It's just,